Elections are a critical element of a liberal democracy. They are meant to ensure orderly process of leadership succession and to reflect the will of people in the changing of political administrations. The 2020 election calendar in Africa was a rather quiet one after a quiet affair due to the COVID-19 pandemic dominating the news. In Ghana, President Nana Akufo-Addo secured another term, as was the case in the Central African Republic, where President Touadera won re-election. Niger's election is headed for a runoff in February after no presidential candidate secured a majority, while Uganda is preparing for their 14 January polls. There are many elections scheduled in Africa in 2021, but not all will be as competitive. To discuss political dynamics unfolding on the continent, we speak to freelance journalist Samira Sawlani. Samira, thank you for your time, and thank you so much for joining us on Weekend Dawn. I mean, the first major question is what's been going on in the Central African Republic. The fact that a president has been announced, but the unrest continues. What is the reason why there's still unrest in the Central African Republic?
Good morning, and thank you for having me on. So there was always a little bit of a prediction that things could get a bit shaky in the Central African Republic. And what's happened is you've had all these rebel groups who were never friends between themselves all of a sudden come together in a very strange alliance. And they came together just before the election and they started calling for it to be cancelled, saying insecurity will mean people will not turn out. And this was ignored, and the elections went ahead, and government was blaming all of this on former President Francois Bozize, who wanted to run again but was blocked by the Constitutional Court. So since then, the elections went ahead. This rebel group alliance that you've got are now saying that the results should be nullified. You've seen some of them carry out violence. They're trying to march into the capital, which is at the moment they're being kept at bay by peacekeepers. So you've basically got a whole grouping. I think it's 10 out of the 17 candidates who are not willing to accept the outcome. You've got President Touadera saying, I won this, and different kind of figures being given out. The Electoral Commission say the turnout was 76%. The opposition are saying it was 37%. You did see violence which stopped people from being able to vote. So there is also the question of how much is the result a reflection of the people. And amid all of it, it is civilians getting caught up in the crossfire. There's collateral damage. The UN has said 30,000 people have crossed over to Cameroon, Chad, DR Congo. That's the current situation, and it doesn't look like anything's about to settle anytime soon.
Now, Samira, what do we know about this violence? Is the former President Francois Bozize involved in this unrest?
Well, the government seems very, very dead set saying that he is, and there are a couple of analysts out there who will also say, well, it seems that he is. He is very quiet on the ground at the moment, so it's difficult to say. And he's been very quiet in general, I think. He didn't take too well to being blocked from running in the election.
And then if we look at the Central African Republic and the regions around there, are they severely affected because of this unrest, and aren't they left with a gap, with a chance for Islamist groups to also get in and attack and try and take control of some of the regions?
At the moment, their neighbouring countries, what they're grappling with is a refugee crisis. That's the biggest impact. So if you see the election was on the 27th of December, it's been 2 weeks and you're already seeing such a huge refugee surge refugees going into these countries. That at the moment is their biggest challenge.
And then the country's faced numerous coups since the 1960s exactly. Now, how is it that the government never handles any of this unrest? I mean, if you look at the 1960s right up to now, it seems as though coups have become a common thing in that country. How can they move away from that? What's the solution to all of this?
I think it will take a lot of peace and reconciliation internally. Remember, Central African Republic is very resource rich. You've also got religious conflict. You've got a lot of rebel groups, you've got a lot of different stakeholders who just at this point cannot come together and agree on things. Until that doesn't get resolved, it will be very difficult for there to be proper peace.
Let's move away now and talk about Niger's second round of elections in February. Can we expect a result to come out this time around?
Well, you know, the ruling party candidate, he came out with 39.33% of the vote, and his challenger, Mohamed Osman, came out with 17%. So there is every possibility that Bazoum could get himself over the edge. It will just depend on everyone that voted for all the other candidates, because there was 30 candidates running. That's a lot of candidates where they will put their votes. So personally, in my opinion, I do think Mr. Bazoum could take it, considering that he does have the backing of the ruling party. But waits to be seen what the outcome will look like.
And talking about outcomes, how do we know that the elections are exactly free and fair, that there is no issues of vote rigging, etc.?
Well, the reports have been positive so far. You know, and there was a 69% turnout, which is, some would say, fairly positive. What a concern that a lot of analysts have put forward for the runoff is, will there be voter fatigue? Will people really be willing to come out again? Niger has actually been pretty badly hit by the pandemic. Will that have an effect on whether people are going to come out and vote? We've seen a lot of insecurity. You know, that whole Sahel region anyway has seen a lot of attacks from armed groups. And Niger has not been spared, so I think that will also have an impact. Difficult to say.
And in terms of the impact of COVID-19 around that region specifically, do many of the countries have it under control at the moment?
I think having it under control is one thing. It's more the hit that it's had on the economies, which is of more concern. You know, you saw Mali, for example, they were set to reopen schools. They've delayed it by a week because at this point, everyone's biggest concern is the new strain. What if the new strain gets here? Then what are we going to do? So actually seeing a lot of these governments be quite proactive in taking steps to at least try and protect themselves as best they can from these new strains. But the economies have been hit. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they've been hit badly.
And then in closing, with regards to Niger, what sort of challenges does the new president face when it comes to things like Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State in that region? Because they've faced a lot of violence over the past few years.
And actually, that's one of the things that, you know, the ruling party candidate, Mohamed Bazoum, one of his campaign points has been about addressing the insecurity. And that's a big one because we don't go more than a few weeks without hearing that there's been an armed group attack, usually at the border with Mali or at the border with Nigeria. And it's a biggie. You know, you're hearing of villages. I think the most recent, they said 70 people last week killed between two villages. That is a real problem, but it's probably unlikely to be resolved unless all those countries come together and work together, because these are porous borders. So that's how rebels, armed insurgents are getting in and out. That will probably be the biggest challenge alongside recovering from the pandemic.
Samira, thank you so much for joining us. That's freelance journalist Samira Sawlani, chatting to us about the recent elections held in the Central African Republic and the dynamics unfolding on that front since the re-election of President Faustin-Archange Touadera, as well as what to expect as Niger head to the polls. That will be taking place on the 21st of February.